Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be a follow-up to my guide video, Into the Unknown. Today I mostly want to go over a couple quick things that I had missed in the guide, and also importantly give a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the love and support on the guide. Seriously guys, thank you so much. I poured my heart and soul into making it both an educational and entertaining experience for everyone, and from the comments it really seems like that's actually shined through. I've been reading and trying to respond to as many comments as I can, and actually through the process of doing so, I found a couple comments that, included a few criticisms that actually helped inspire making this follow-up video. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So the first and probably definitely most thorough comment that I got on the video comes from Twilight Cadmia, who said, "Not a bad guide, but as an unknown player, I can easily see a certain bias towards his UVX rather than using his hallucinations, and a complete lack of interest in undetectable/oblivious being destructive on this killer. For example, Sketch Attempt is extremely good for mind games, teleporting away and confusing the chasee, and making the survivor feel safe due to the lack of terror radius. And you rated it below the exhaustion one that cancels a vast total of 8 perks, 2 of which the survivor in question wouldn't be affected by, as they aren't in a chase, background player, or just started one, Sprint Burst. Additionally, you don't even mention strategic placement of the hallucinations, excluding outside of loops, and actually completely skip over the ability to delay the placement of the hallucination with a tap of your right click, or if your UVX isn't up, an attack. Overall, good guide on how to specifically use the UVX on the unknown goat." First of all, I do want to say a big thank you again to Twilight Cadmia for leaving this comment and, just giving me some general criticism of things and, pointing out a few things that were left out. I definitely did realize shortly after posting that I did leave out some points in the hallucinations that I did want to go a little bit further into, and they pretty much covered almost everything that I really want to put in here. Yeah, I felt almost embarrassed actually realizing that I didn't put in the, as we like to say, edging the power, so to speak, by tapping it to place your hallucinations where you want to. I mentioned this in my reply to Twilight, and I asked if there's anything else that they would suggest me putting in, so, if I'm making a follow-up, which, hey, here it is. This is what they had to say. "I just mentioned hallucination placement and using the range of sound effects being small to use undetectable really well. One of the quietest vaults, and that they can only hear your TPs within 14 meters away, etc. To keep things simple, by using our bar at the bottom, or more easily, the auras on the side of our screen turning yellow along with the sound effect, we want to right click immediately to start cancelling out our power. Mind you, of course, this does need to be a 0.2 second click, so just a simple tap will do. Once you start doing it more and more, you'll kind of get into the rhythm of it, and it'll become a very second nature thing for you at that point." As Twilight mentioned in their comment, they also stated that using an attack will also cancel out the spawn. Attacking will not cancel it like using the power, but if you do use a lunge, you can use it to instead lunge towards an object. And why do I mention an object exactly? Well, spawn restrictions as we've talked about previously, those being generators, hooks, and pallets, and of course, hallucinations. So while attacking won't cancel out the spawn, it can get you a little bit closer to some of these objects to still do the same effect, and to stall for your extra 7 seconds before you have your power to do so. Also, to touch on ideal hallucination placement, thought it'd be a good idea to more or less give you guys a visual example on, say, a map like Eyrie of Crows that most killers would usually, have problems on. Ideally having 1 hallucination in the balcony, and 3 spread across the map in a fairly even. You won't always have them even, but in this example, this is about the most ideal powerful setup you could have, as we have the vantage point so we can see anywhere on the map for the most part. We can shoot and potentially get some sniper shots, and then we are able to use a hallucination to predict where they're going next and be able to cut them off. Much like this setup also works on just about almost all the A tiers that we talked about in our previous video. They all follow kind of the similar format of important main building that you can use for sniping, place a hallucination up there, that's your sniper point. Spreading your other 3 hallucinations and other important points across the map. As for other maps that don't really share the same formula, the main important thing to keep note of is just spreading your hallucinations out as much as you can. Being able to cover the most ground possible, not having everything too congested together, but in certain maps it can be good. And eventually, if you have a lot of map knowledge in general, you'll usually know where people are going to be running to, so you can also place your hallucinations in certain points to cut people off. Or alternatively, if you are going for a more stealthy approach, you can also use this to your advantage to hide hallucinations in places that you don't think people will look either, as well as places that are a little bit further out of the way that are less worth it for the survivors to even go their way to get in the first place. The final thing I want to talk about in regards to hallucinations is briefly touching back on the spawn restrictions, specifically the 14-meter hallucination one. Because one thing I did leave out is actually this 14-meter rule can actually be cheated in some cases. And the way we do that is through elevation. As you can see in our example, both of our hallucinations are right next to each other, but on different elevations. I think the main purpose for this is mostly for maps like Game that, would have complicated things if you couldn't have hallucinations quite on the same area but on different levels. There are some maps that can sort of take advantage of this little trick, but honestly, it's a small minor thing, but I did figure it was important. Hey, why not mention it if we're going into detail on hallucinations? So hey, keep it in mind and see if you can take advantage of it in your next game. Now, before going further on the stealth side of things, I wanted to address the whole exhaustion add-ons over top of the Oblivious add-ons. And the main reason that I did place most of those exhaustion add-ons over above the Oblivious ones was more commonly you are going to get a lot more exhaustion perk users of all levels from low MMR to high MMR, as opposed to the usefulness of Oblivious from, again, low MMR to high MMR. That's not to say that Oblivious is useless or not even, remotely fun at high level gameplay. You can definitely take advantage of it, and it is very strong depending on what you do with it. But as for being able to remove stuff like Dead Hard and Lithe, even Overcome, a lot of these really strong exhaustion perks you're very likely to see every game, I just found that exhaustion is just more useful for the job. But again, that's not to discredit how fun Oblivious can be, and that's why I want to touch a little bit further on that. So getting to the other half of Twilight's comment about Sketch Attempt, the add-on can be very helpful in a lot of hit and run style builds or stealth type build, as it can bait survivors into a false sense of security. While the example on screen does use Oblivious to take advantage of the survivor, and we're definitely going to ignore the fact that it is a bot, this kind of crazy shot would still work on a normal human as well, but again, I just don't really think that you really need the Oblivious to do something like that. And because Sketch Attempt is only for 30 seconds after damaging with the UVX, you do have to make the follow-up count. So while UVX is typically your most key way to get people down, Sketch Attempt's strength more comes from utilizing your hallucination placement. This means you need to be mindful of the 14-meter range that people can hear you teleport, because if they aren't in the range, then you can usually get a really fun follow-up. Overall, with all this in mind, I just felt as though exhaustion was just a little bit more consistent than more of a stealth approach, as one add-on basically changes your playstyle, and the other add-on completely cancels out very commonly used perks. The last comment I wanted to talk about comes from Dylan Meyer, who says, "The editing for this video is great. I love the X-Files style edits, and it's a great video. I have one major criticism. You didn't put an Insidious build on the character that benefits the most from Insidious." Dylan also included the full perk build and a full description on how to use it, as well as some of the problems of course too, as it is more of a fun build and not really a build, made for winning. Originally I wanted to include an Insidious style build in the build section on the video, but the reason why I didn't is the exact same reasons that are stated in Dylan's comment. The fact that survivors can see your aura through walls if you're a hallucination, but if they were to check through walls for you, then they would know that you in fact are not a hallucination. And instead of, going for that funny haha jump scare, you just look like a fool, unfortunately. But that is also not to say that you shouldn't even give this build a go, because if you want to just do something for fun, and Dead by Daylight, despite popular belief, it is for fun, I'd honestly just say give it a go. Just keep in mind not to weaken people either, because they'll also be able to know it's you if they're staring at you and removing their status. I want to share Dylan's build in this video, as we were touching on stealth, and that was something that wasn't quite talked about as much as I wanted to in the guide, as well as with Twilight's comment as well, bringing up Sketch Attempt and other things of the like. I noticed a handful of other comments talking about how they love jump scaring people, so I thought this would all be very important to include. And with that out of the way, I think that covers just about everything that I might have missed, and hopefully filled in a few blanks that might have been missing throughout the guide video. If you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe, do all the cool YouTube things. Find me over on Twitch Monday to Friday, 7 PM Eastern to whenever we end, over on twitch.tv/honestpanda. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care everyone, and have a good one.
Now this just in, police officers in Lancaster, Pennsylvania were asking people to be on the lookout for a man who robbed a store. And I think, yeah, I think we do have his description. Can we take that? Let's take his description. Okay. This is the guy they wanted people in Pennsylvania to be out on the lookout for.